So let's get started. As you can see here, I have an empty project, nothing special. So I'm gonna start by creating a plane as a ground, and I'm gonna rename this to ground as well. Then I'm gonna change the Z scale, and also let's create a new folder for the materials, and I'm gonna call it materials. Inside this folder, let's create a new material, and I'm gonna call it ground. Then let's give it a dark green color, and let's assign this material to our ground. I'm gonna change the main camera rotation and position so that we can see the ground much better. Then also I'm gonna change the background to a blue color. After that, let's create the player. So I'm gonna choose a cube for that, and I'm gonna resize it a little bit so it will look like a gun. Then I'm gonna change the main camera position so that we can see the gun over here. And let's create a new material. I'm gonna call it player, and let's give it a black color. Then let's assign this material to the cube, or I'm gonna rename it to player. Also, I'm gonna change its position along the y-axis a little bit. Then let's start by creating the bullet. So I'm gonna choose a sphere for that. Then let's rename this to bullet as well. Then I'm gonna double click it to focus on it, and let's change the X and the Y scale a little bit so that will look like a bullet. I'm gonna change the radius to 0.25. Then I'm gonna create a new material, and let's call this material bullet. I'm gonna give it a purple color. You can choose any color you want. I'm gonna assign this color to the bullet. Now we need to create a prefab of it so that we can use it. So I'm gonna drag in this inside the assets folder. Then I'm gonna start by creating a new folder. Let's call this folder scripts. Inside this folder, let's start by creating the new C# script. I'm gonna call it player. Then let's double click it to open it up in Visual Studio. Inside this script, let's start by adding a reference for our bullet using public game object. And let's call this bullet. We are going to assign this from the inspector. Then under the update method, we are going to check if we press the left mouse button using input.getButtonDown, and the button is called fire1. So if we press the left mouse button, we are going to instantiate the bullet using the instantiate method. We are going to give it the game object, which is the bullet, and we are going to use the transform.position. And let's add to that the transform.forward. And for the rotation, we are going to use quaternion.identity. Now, if we save this and go back into Unity, let's select the player, and let's attach the player script. And under here, we are going to assign the bullet. Then if we hit play, and when I press the left mouse button, we have here the bullet instantiated, but we need to add a force to it to move forward. And to do that, I'm gonna create a new C# script under the scripts folder, and let's call this bullet. Then inside the script, I'm gonna start by creating a speed variable using public float speed, and let's give it a value by default 5000. Then in the update method, we are going to access a rigid body component. So we are going to move the bullet using a rigid body component using get component rigid body, and let's use the method add force. And for the force, we are going to use transform.forward, and let's multiply this by the speed and also by the time.delta time. Now if we save this and go back into Unity, first we need to open the prefab, and let's add a rigid body component. Then let's assign the script or attach it to the bullet. And over here we have the script. Now if we hit play, as you can see, we have the bullet moving forward, but we need to add some constraints. To do that, let's open the prefab again. Then over here we are going to freeze the X and the Y position. And also let's freeze the X and the Y rotation. Now let's play again. As you can see, when I tap on the screen, as you can see, we have here the bullet moving forward. Now let's add a target to our game. So in the hierarchy, right click, 3D object, and let's choose a cube. Then let's reset the transform, and I'm gonna move it forward along the Z axis, and let's rename this to target. Then we need to attach a rigid body component, but before that let's move it a little bit to the top, and under here let's add a new component, a rigid body component. Let's leave the settings as default. If we hit play, as you can see, the cube is affected when I push it using the bullet, but let's change the scale. So I'm gonna scale it by 1.5 along the X, Y, and Z axis, and also let's move it. Now if we hit play again, as you can see, I can throw this cube. Now let's add enemies to our game to protect this target. So in the hierarchy, I'm gonna create an empty game object. Let's reset the transform, and let's rename it to enemy as well. Then I'm gonna move it over the target. So let's change the Z position to 12. Then under this empty game object, let's create 4 cylinders. So if the player hits one of these cylinders, the game is over. Let's use 4 cylinders on each side. So I'm gonna change the position of these cylinders to protect this target. And let's add new materials. So I'm gonna use a red color. So under the materials folder, let's create a new material, and let's rename it to obstacle. And I'm gonna give it a red color. Then let's assign it to all of these cylinders over here. Now we are going to create a script to rotate this enemy around the Y axis. So let's go to the scripts folder. Then over here we are going to create a new C# script to rotate the enemy, and let's call this enemy as well. Then let's open it up in Visual Studio. Inside this script, let's start by creating a float variable, which is going to be the rotation speed, public float rotation speed. And I'm gonna give it a value by default 50, and under the update method we are going to rotate it using transform.rotate, and we are going to rotate it around the Y axis. So let's put 0 for the X, and for the Y let's use the rotation speed multiplied by the time delta time, and for the Z let's put it to 0. Then if we save this and go back into Unity, let's select the enemy and attach the enemy script to it. Now if we hit play, you see that we have these cylinders, and we can push the cube, but we need to check if we hit the obstacle, one of the obstacles, we need to stop the game or show a game over screen. And to do that, we are going to add a new tag. So let's select the cylinders, and let's add a new tag over here. I'm gonna call it obstacle. Then let's assign this tag to our cylinders. And in the bullet script, we are going to use onCollisionEnter method. This is going to be called when the bullet hits something. So we're gonna check if that something is the obstacle using if collision.transform.tag equals obstacle. In this case, we are going to pause the game for now, but you can show a game over screen. So I'm gonna use time.timescale equals 0 to stop the game. I hope that I can do that. to complete this game as well. So let's hit play again, and now if we hit the cube we can push it, but if we hit one of the cylinders the game is stopped. And finally we are going to add a wall over here, and when the target hits that wall we are going to destroy the target and instantiate another one at the enemy position. And to do that, let's create a new cube. Let's reset the transform, and I'm gonna change the Z position over here, and let's change the X and the Y scale, and also I'm gonna move it a little bit to the top. Now let's rename this to wall. Then under the materials folder let's create a new material, and I'm gonna give it a yellow one, so let's call this wall, and let's change the color to a yellow color. Then let's assign this material to our wall. We are going to check if the target hits that wall, we are going to destroy it, and instantiate another one. So let's create a prefab from that target. Now under the scripts folder let's create a C# script, and let's call this wall. Then let's open it up. In this script let's remove the start and the update method. We don't need these, and we are going to use the method on collision enter. So we're gonna check if collision dot transform dot tag equals target. We are going to assign this target tag to our target. In this case we are going to destroy it using destroy collision dot game object. And also we need to instantiate another cube, so let's add a reference to our cube using public game object, and let's call this target. Then over here we are going to instantiate a new target using instantiate. We are going to instantiate the target cube, and for the position we are going to use the enemy position using I'm gonna use find object of type enemy. You can create a reference for the enemy game object and use the transform position, but I'm gonna use find object of type enemy dot transform dot position. And for the rotation let's use quaternion dot identity. But also if the bullet hits that wall we need to destroy it as well. We are going to use destroy collision dot transform or dot game object, sorry. Now if we save this and go back into Unity, let's select the wall and assign the wall script to it. Then I'm gonna add a tag over here. Let's change the tag of the target. I'm gonna add a new tag, let's call it target. Make sure to spell that right. Then let's assign this tag to our cube, and when we hit play again, and if I push the cube to that wall, the cube gets destroyed. But we have an error. That's because we didn't add the target to our wall. So select the wall, then over here let's drag in the target to our target parameter. Now if we hit play again, as you can see, when I push the cube to that wall, it gets destroyed and another one gets instantiated at the enemy position. But when I hit one of the cylinders, you see the game is stopped. Finally, I wanted to add sounds to our game, so I'm gonna drag and drop these sounds inside our Unity project. The first one is a theme, so let's drag and drop this to our main camera. Make sure to set it to loop. And also I wanted to add a shoot sound when we throw a bullet. So I'm gonna add this sound to our player. Then from the player script, we are going to use get component. We are going to get the audio source that we've just attached to our player using get component audio source. And we are going to use the method play to play the sound. Now let's save this. And finally, I wanted to add the smash sound when a cube gets destroyed. So I'm gonna attach this to the wall. And let's remove play on awake. The same thing for the player. And check play on awake. Then under the wall script, when we destroy the target, I wanted to play the sound using get component audio source. So we are going to play the smash audio using the play method. Now if we save this and go back into Unity and hit this play button, you see we have our game. But sorry guys, because this game took me more than 15 minutes, but we have a game from scratch. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As you can see, we have a game. You can also add a game over screen. For example, when I hit this cylinder, you can display a game over screen to replay the game. That's pretty much it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Please tell me, what do you think about this game? Is it great? Write that in the comment section down below. And have a great day.